Welcome to a screencast on an introduction to molecular geometry. Molecules of different substances, whether it's a fairly small molecule like a water molecule, or a very large complicated molecule like a DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid molecule, have molecular geometries that very much determine the properties of that substance. Water is a small molecule. It has a bent shape. It's a polar molecule. And because of its shape and polarity, it has some unique properties that are actually essential to life as we know it. Water has a very high boiling point, a very high heat capacity. It's able to dissolve many substances. And if water didn't have those properties, life as we know it just would not exist. DNA is a molecule that's made up of two polynucleotide chains. These chains coil around each other and make a double helix structure. And this molecule carries genetic instructions for how we develop, how we function, how we grow, how we reproduce, and in fact, how all known organisms do that. And if DNA did not have the structure that it does, it wouldn't be able to perform these functions. Now, why do small molecules like water, large complicated molecules like DNA, and everything in between, why do they have the shapes they do, which allow them to perform the functions that they perform or to behave in the way that they behave? And it turns out that there's a very simple principle involved in determining molecular geometry. And that is that regions of high electron density, which are chemical bonds, those are places where there's high electron density, can also be lone pairs, and that's where there's high electron density. And these regions repel each other. They're all negatively charged, so opposite charges repel. And it turns out that the most stable or the lowest energy molecules, the lowest energy, most stable molecular structure, ends up being formed when these high electron density regions or electron groups are as far apart as they can be. If they're as far apart as possible, then that minimizes the repulsions between them, and that leads to more molecular stability, lower energy molecules. Now, the geometry that's determined by these electron group repulsions ends up determining the shape of the molecule. And we call this the valence shell electron pair repulsion theory. It's abbreviated VSEPR, sometimes pronounced VSEPR, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. Valence electrons, high electron density regions, repel each other, and then this repulsion, or these repulsions, determines the geometry of the molecule, the shape of the molecule, and how it therefore functions. Now, there are several basic shapes, and we're going to take a look at them one by one. And the first basic shape is illustrated by a molecule of beryllium difluoride. In this molecule, there's a beryllium atom in the center. It's bonded to a fluorine and a second fluorine. So there are two beryllium fluorine bonds, which means two high electron density regions. Those two regions repel each other, and for two regions to get as far apart from each other as possible in a molecule, they're on opposite sides. That gives the molecule a linear shape, and it gives the fluorine beryllium fluorine bond angle 180 degrees. Now, the next molecule we'll look at is boron tribromide. That has a boron bonded to three bromines. So boron bonded to bromine, second bromine, third bromine. That has 1, 2, 3 bonds or three regions of high electron density. Those regions repel each other and get as far apart as possible. It makes a structure that looks like this. And you might notice that that looks like a triangular shape. We actually call that trigonal. And then it's a flat or planar triangular shape, so we call it trigonal planar. And now the bond angle from bromine to boron to bromine, that bond angle is about 120 degrees. So is this one, and so is that one. Next up is a molecule of methane, CH4, that has a carbon atom bonded to 4 different hydrogen atoms. So carbon in the center. We're moving it around a bit so you can see that the molecule is 3-dimensional. So bonds to hydrogen, hydrogen, 3rd and 4th hydrogen. That gives it 1, 2, 3, 4 regions of electron density in 3-dimensional space for them to get as far apart as possible. It has a shape that looks like this. And how we name it, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 faces to this structure, which look kind of like a pyramid. So it's a 4-faced pyramid, and the geometric name for that shape is a tetrahedron. So we call this tetrahedral in its geometry. And tetrahedral molecules have a bond angle. So in this case, it's hydrogen to hydrogen bond angle. That's 109.5 degrees. So is that one. So is this one. In fact, all the bond angles in there are 109.5 degrees. Next up is phosphorus pentafluoride. It's a phosphorus in the middle, bonded to 5 fluorines. So phosphorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fluorines. That gives us 5 electron groups. For them to get as far apart as possible, it has a shape of the molecule we just are looking at. And if we look at it from the top, that looks like a triangle. And it is, so we call that trigonal. And then there's a pyramid above that triangle. And then there's a pyramid below the triangle. So we actually, since there's 2 pyramids, call it trigonal bipyramidal. Now, this molecule actually has a sort of top and a bottom electron group region. We call those axial positions. And then there's 3 around, we call it the equator. And those are equatorial positions. And now that is a 90-degree bond angle from fluorine to phosphorus to fluorine in the axial to equatorial position. And then if we look at only equatorial, that is 120 fluorine, phosphorus, fluorine bond angle. Now, sulfur hexafluoride is our last compound. It's a sulfur in the center, bonded to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fluorines. 6 electron groups, getting as far apart as possible, looks like this. What do we call that sort of shape? Well, it's a pyramid on the top and on the bottom with 1, 2, 3, 4 faces on the top, and 1, 2, 3, 4 more faces on the bottom. That's a total of 8 faces to this geometric shape, and we then call that an octahedral shape because the geometric object is an octahedron. And in octahedral electron group geometry, the bond angle, in this case it's a fluorine-sulfur-fluorine bond angle, is 90 degrees. And you can see so are the other bond angles. So a summary of our shapes that we have seen. 2 electron groups arrange themselves in a linear shape with 180-degree bond angles. 3 electron groups forms a trigonal planar shape with 120-degree bond angles. 4 electron groups is what we call tetrahedral with 109.5-degree bond angles. 5 electron groups is a trigonal bipyramidal shape with both 90 and 120-degree bond angles. And 6 electron groups makes an octahedral geometry with 90-degree bond angles. Now, quick note, these are the shapes that are made where all of the electron groups are bond groups. These are all a bond from one atom to another atom. We can also have electron groups that are lone pairs that don't bond to other atoms. those make shapes that are subsets of these basic shapes, and that will be covered in another screencast. And that is it for this one.